Joining me now is Molly Hemingway, editor-in-chief of The Federalist, Fox News contributor, and Chris Bedford, executive editor of the Common Sense Society. Molly, what's most important for both frontrunners at this point? Let's start with President Trump.
Yeah, I like the advice that you gave. I think President Trump has the advantage of having so many Republican voters who don't just like him, they love him. They loved the policies that he did when he was president. But they are genuinely concerned about whether or not he can win, and he needs to make that case that he can win. He should talk about the coalition that he's building, why he has the ability to put together the best coalition, what his successes were during his first term as president, and just really address that issue, that concern that many Republicans have. And as for Ron DeSantis, I think he needs to also follow your advice there of not listening to the swamp voices about what he should do, but really trusting his gut, understanding that he should not be trying to distance himself so much from President Trump because of how much Republican voters do like those Trump policies.
Well, and Chris, to Molly's point, and then I'm going to get to a statement Trump made today, but to Molly's point on DeSantis, I didn't see the entire interview, but I do know that when he talked about Putin today, he said, yeah, I think he is guilty of war crimes. And, I'm not saying that's a bad thing to say at all, but it does kind of begin to shift him over toward the GOP establishment, especially given what Xi and Putin just pulled off with their meeting and a new meeting scheduled in Beijing. Your thoughts on the Ukraine angle, which I did not address tonight?
Well, it's unless you can explain the difference between somebody committing war crimes and the just interests of the United States. Of course, it's just for the United States to try and stop war crimes, but is it always in U.S. interest? When you're courting World War III, that's something that should be seriously considered. It's something that's not at all been considered here in Washington, D.C. It's something that people like DeSantis and a lot of Americans are actually wondering. So you don't have to actually say Vladimir Putin's a good guy. You can sit back and say, obviously, this is a bad man, but is it in the American interest to take boys from Iowa and girls from New Jersey and to get them potentially embroiled in a massive and escalating war in Ukraine? Because that is the kind of danger we're playing with here. And DeSantis, I think, at least so far, has done a good job of threading that needle.
And Molly, I want to get your reaction to the statement President Trump released today criticizing DeSantis. It gets to something I hit on in the angle. He said he is, for a Republican, an average governor. Ron was a big lockdown governor. Other Republican governors did much better than Ron. And because I allowed them this freedom, never closed their states. Molly, do you think anyone in America thinks lockdowns when they hear Ron DeSantis?
Not very many people would think that, because even while he did have some shutdowns early on in the COVID pandemic response, he was kind of known for resisting that. And he had so much success. It's one of his things that he's probably, if he runs, he will be touting his great success in how he handled the response to the COVID pandemic much better than other governors did. And that's just another thing I want to say. Ron DeSantis should focus on what a good governor he is and how he's shown such leadership and how other Republican governors should be. But he should not backtrack. He had some good statements on the Ukraine war that matched with what the average Republican voter and even average American really thinks about the Biden-McConnell foreign policy that we are being subjected to right now. When he kind of catered to that Beltway establishment swamp mindset, I think that worries a lot of people that he won't have the courage of his convictions to stay strong. I mean, he's been pretty nuanced in both ways, so we'll see how it goes. But he does need to show courage under fire from how the Beltway establishment is going to react to him not adopting the failed foreign policy that they have been pushing for decades.
Now, and Chris, look, Trump has the experience with obviously these foreign leaders. He knows what it's like to face down NATO, tell them to stand up, spend more money at their military, even though he got huge pushback from the usual suspects in the media and politics back home. Now, DeSantis doesn't have that experience. Doesn't mean he can't be great at it. But Trump has the advantage, in my mind, on the geopolitical stage with Xi dealing with them and certainly the Europeans, given how things seem to be declining in much of the West today.
Yes, despite the shrill cries from other networks or from the Washington Post that Donald Trump was always being laughed at by Europeans, they did exactly what he asked them to do. He was essentially a giant when he bestrode the world stage. He walked with the power of the United States, and people listened. He was dining across from Xi Jinping when he had missiles launched at Syria. That's something I think Ron DeSantis has been trying to hit on, too, because Donald Trump's foreign policy was consistently undermined, and his phone calls leaked by his generals in Afghanistan and by the National Security Council. This happened over and over again, and DeSantis has made the point that personnel is something that he takes very seriously, that this is something he's surrounded himself with, very loyal people in his government. He hasn't had those leaks, and a lot of the personnel problems that Donald Trump suffered from have gotten significantly worse after he left office. There's still a good amount of slime and grift around the former president. But he's got that great advantage. If you go to Iowa, where DeSantis and Donald Trump have been in the last 2 weeks, DeSantis is still only drawing a couple hundred people, which is a lot more than anyone else, except for Donald Trump. Everywhere he goes, thousands and thousands of people still show up. There are still lines out front. Because the GOP is so stupid, generally, the professional class, these are the only two candidates who are running in the populist lane. So it's going to be up to them to try and figure out who's going to be the nominee. Donald Trump's got the excitement, but DeSantis, I think, does have a better team.
Molly and Chris, great to see both of you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.